I gotta teach you.
I gotta go. So after homeboy got enrolled in medical school, he like threw up on like 15 autopsies and like missed a really critical test and was like, oh, I'm out of here. So he dropped out or he got kicked out. I can't remember which. Yeah, maybe we should restart the video. Sorry. Thank you. And then because of his failures in medical school, he went to Plan B and he joined the seminary. Is that what you call it when you try to become a priest? Is that seminary? Priesthood, whatever. He went to priest school.
University of Priesting.
Yeah, when he went to the University of Priests. Apparently there, I don't know, apparently there, something about the academic environment wasn't right for him. It's fair to say that academically he was kind of a horrible student and somewhat of a motivational loser. But it's probably also fair to say that priest school sucked and he was actually very likely a genius. And so, you know, there's a little balance to the story. He had really low motivation, he wasn't into it, and so he bailed out of that too. And it probably was a horrible place to be, and he was probably too smart for it, whatever. So, he goes home and he complains to his parents again, like, you guys, I just don't want to do school things, I just want to be rich, leave me alone. And they're like, okay, fine, we'll pull some strings. We'll get you to sail around the world and you can go shoot stuff. He's like, yeah, that sounds good. Because you guys know that back in the day, the beginnings of our understanding of ecology was to collect wildlife. And we talked about this, right? Biogeography. We talked about that, right? Yeah. So he was hired to go on a boat to shoot like birds and mammals and whatever he could shoot. Collect plants and flowers and seeds. And that was his job, and he was actually really into that. But apparently, when he got on the ship, all the sailors like made fun of him for being like a rich kid that didn't like know what time it was. So he had his fancy ruffled shirt and stuff, and they're like, haha, lightweight. And he was like, they picked on him, and he like hated his life on the boat. And if you read his journals, the beginning of the trip, where he's going across the big crossing to make it over to the Americas, he was like depressed and mopey and like. He would sit on the top decks and like cry and look at the stars and like throw stuff into the ocean and like get bullied by all the big old hardy sailors. And apparently that maybe that's one of the reasons he was so good at his job. He shot like a bajillion things. He brought home this spectacular collection. He did an excellent job because he was kind of into science and he was kind of a nerd and he kind of liked plants and animals and stuff. And so he like, you know, did a great job at what he was supposed to do. But one of the things that stuck with him from the priest school was he remembered Malthus' essay. He had read it as part of like the social working class or whatever they call it. So like in Social Working 101, he read the Malthus essay. And so he understood that, you know, like in terms of social workers, population is a really big challenge and that blah, blah, blah. And then he's out there and he's like, if I'm going to shoot an elk to take back to my boss in London, I should shoot the big specimen. And he said, wow, that big specimen probably gets more food than the little specimen. And he noticed, hey, you know, maybe in nature, that same kind of competition that Malthus wrote about in the slums of London. And so he thought about the concept that Malthus discussed and applied it to nature, and that's sort of the rough draft of evolution by natural selection. Paul, what's up, homie?
Just wanted to say hi.
Oh, dude, you want some water? You want to kick back? You want to bite my burrito? No, there's bacon in it.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
I like it when you interrupt.
I don't want
You want to sit? You want to see the picture of the deer my friend shot?
Is this the story?
Yeah.
I want to see a picture of the
Clear,
bird
Paul.
shot.
Look at that. Hold it in the butt. All the snow out there? Do a little butt. I haven't learned much. That's how you pass it. All right, students, I'm sorry for the interruption. Now back to me. So, as I was saying, the extent of Malthus' influence on Darwin was that Malthus, in speaking about the poor in London, reminded Darwin that competition is also a problem in the wild when he speaks of animals. And that's the end of the whole social thing between Malthus and Darwin and society. There's a few other things you should know. Darwin was a deeply religious man, and he was really conflicted to apply evolution to humans. Not only did he never discuss Darwinism for societies in terms of poor and rich, he even struggled with saying evolution of humans at all, because as a really religious guy and also kind of embarrassed to ruin his family's reputation in a religious community, he never wanted to say that. In his journals, he was really torn up. And it's one of the main... Quiet in the back. Yeah. And it's kind of one of the main reasons that he didn't want to publish his book. He sat on a manuscript for something like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years or something. He ended up writing books about like breeding pigeons and stuff, because he didn't want to publish that one he'd written about evolution because he was so nervous about that. He never, ever, ever wanted evolution to be applied to humans. And he certainly never applied it to societies. To call it social Darwinism is just a mean malappropriation of the concept. Survival of the fitter is definitely the method by which natural selection affects reproductive success. You're tall enough to reach the food, so you have more babies, that's fine. But Darwin never said anything about societies. He didn't believe that societies would evolve. And, you know, he was really deeply committed to, like, feeding the poor, and, like, he really had, like, a lot of social responsibility, and, you know, he was, like, a really religious guy, and he really thought of social justice as being a really important thing. And so I just hate the idea of social Darwinism being attributed to either Malthus or Darwin. Because Malthus never said anything about letting people starve. He wanted the opposite, to end people starving. And Darwin was also like a really conscious, careful person that did not support things like social Darwinism. Later on, when that term was applied to him, I just kind of feel it's like naming a bomb after Gandhi or something. Like, it's mean, and it's wrong. And the concept works. We all know what social Darwinism is. That's fine. If that's the word for social Darwinism, that's the word. I'm not worried about it. But mark my words, when you're in college one day, a professor in a hurry will say blah, 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 and then Darwin, and then the social Darwinism thing. And I want you to send a little text message where you go, oh yes, I remember you told me, it's right.
Have you ever gotten a text message saying that?
Yeah, actually I have. An email. Okay. So remember this one day that Jose told you, Darwin did not believe in social Darwinism. And never said anything that could even be remotely applied to societies at all. Hey, was there a hand somewhere? Yeah?
Yeah, so if Darwin was originally against publishing his findings because he was so religious, why would he argue against other religious philosophers in his time?
Well, he did that later A, he was an intellectual. B, when religious institutions made conflict with his fundamental theory, he defended it very vociferously and very well, I might add. But he only published his on the theory of natural selection, whatever it's called. I can't remember the name right now. He only published his thing about natural selection because another author sent him a manuscript and said, hey man, what do you think? I'm about to publish this book. And it was the same idea. So he was like, oh crap, I better publish mine first. And he was not actually prepared to publish it, and he didn't want to, and his journals show that he was really distraught about that. I think the other guy's name was Wallace. I could be mistaken about this. I'm totally fumbling my story on video here. But the dude who sent him the transcript was like, hey man, you're a really good scientist, and you've written all that stuff about like all the wildlife that you saw in the Americas. Does this match your understanding of biogeography? Because Darwin primarily got famous for his work on the beagle. And so he's like, yeah, you should work on this a little while. And he actually sandbagged the other dude. He like waited a while to reply. Yeah, then he's like, oh, this might work. Maybe, polish off the typos and sit on it for a while. And in the meantime, he like runs out the door and like goes to a publisher like, please, 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 we got to get this out right away. Because he wanted to get credit first in some books.
So someone else had the same idea.
Roughly, slightly competing, but mostly the same, yeah. I think we credit Charles Darwin, but it's very likely that other people said smart things similar much earlier. Well, I mean, intellectual property is a really difficult thing to attribute totally. If you come up with a good idea, I might be like, well, wait a minute, I told him 90% of that, or I gave him all the building blocks and he just tied it together, or I said it in a conversation once, and it's really impossible to know where it comes from. I do give him credit for it, though. I think that it's a beautifully written book, and the way that he puts together the logic of it is actually pretty robust. And I think that the concept, like the way he talks about evolution, there is so much nuance in his writing that nowadays that natural selection has been reconsidered by millions of extremely intelligent people. It's pretty hard to explain it better than Darwin first wrote it. Like, that's pretty rare. The changes that have come up are generally subtle to his basic theory. There was a couple of big typos, but otherwise he was mostly spot on. Mostly. All right. Anyway, I just wasted like half an hour because I really wanted to talk to you about this Malthus and Darwin thing because it nags at me, the social Darwinism thing. I mean, for one thing, I find it an objectionable philosophy. But second of all, to attribute it to someone who probably lived his life believing in the opposite, I think it's just kind of mean-spirited. And okay. 48 is one of my favorite study goals in the year. You should know, first of all, that I have a lot of notes that are different from your book. You should know, second of all, that one of my pet obsessions, one of the things that I think about all the time, is how our species will expire. I mean, think about what I do for a living. I give promising, brilliant young people who are excited and intelligent and curious and beautiful truckloads of bad news and convince them that they're all going to die. My job is basically dabbling in the most depressing thing, and I deliver it at the most depressing time. For a washed-up old fat guy that keeps doing the same thing year after year, to stand in front of all of you at this moment when your rocket is leaving the silo, I don't know, it kind of crushes my spirit a little bit, so I end up thinking about the apocalypse nonstop. And I've been reading apocalyptic fiction full-time since I started this job. It's all I read. I've read every major apocalyptic work of fiction going back to like the 30s. Like I've probably read maybe 40 or 50 of like the classics of apocalyptic fiction. So I always think about this. And my students always go, extinction, 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 the Holocene extinction. Humans, how are we going to last forever? If we're not going to last forever, what's it going to be? And I know what it's going to be, and I'll bet my family name that our species will finally reach its end because of disease. Not like a single disease that's going to be a super disease, but more likely we'll suffer a bunch of consecutive diseases that drag down our population to right around zero.
When do you think?
I have no time predictions. Never believe someone who can predict the future. But conceptually, there's very good reason to believe that disease is more of a challenge in the future than it's been in the past. And that's study goal number 48. And I'll warn you, second of all, that this is not just intriguing, it's a great way to organize the entire course. Because these themes from 1 to 9 weave together almost all of our units. And remember that in the very first chapter, one of the things that your book said is the themes in this book will be blah, 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 change in systems, and also urbanization. The fact that our species is moving to cities. This ties together Unit 1, Unit 3, Unit 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. In this study, go through little bits that come up all year. So here's how I organize this. Please look up. The number is a factor that is increasing in our exposure to disease, in our risk fighting disease. And in parentheses is the reason why that factor is going up. All of this is environmental science, and I'd recommend you take notes. And by the way, it's just fascinating to think about. Now,
What's the word after urban?
I'll get to it. Because you know that I don't ask you to copy stuff and not talk about it. So number 1, anybody know what zoogenic means?
Why?
Like what's a zoo, zoological?
Animal disease.
Animal? Yeah, and genic, like Genesis.
Bible.
What?
Old Testament.
Yes, you are. Anybody else? Genesis? Yeah, it starts from an animal. That's right. Please look up. Diseases that start from animals are becoming a bigger risk. We've already seen this. As an example, you've heard of the swine flu, a disease that spread to humans from sick animals. Remember, please, that the disease mutates in the animal, not in the human. You're being bombarded. Right now, you are bathed in diseases that don't infect humans. You're covered in lizard diseases and bird diseases and cow diseases and dog and cat diseases. And that's cool because you're a human and your body's different and they don't really work in you. However, every now and then, one little fluke occurs inside of another animal, and a pig will be like, oh wow, I'm glad the cold went away, because a mutation inside the pig made that cold more aggressive toward humans and maybe even less aggressive toward pigs. So the pig's all happy and doing the pig dance and walking around. And some poor human like licks the pig's face or something. Or it gets coughed on by another sick person or whatever. And the whole point with zoogenic diseases is that they are diseases in an animal which can survive within a human. You've heard of swine flu more recently. Before that, you may have heard of the bird flu.
Ebola.
You may have heard of Ebola. You might know that HIV is a variant of a primate immunodeficiency virus. Probably somebody was slaughtering a monkey, and then the blood got into the cud or something. The reason that zoogenic diseases are becoming more common... No, you can't have sex with them. Teeth and claws. I tried. Zoogenic diseases...
Primate rape.
They are huge. Zoogenic diseases are on the rise because, number one, our cities are spreading into wilderness more and more. And because humans keep rushing into the big cities, those cities keep cutting into the forest or into the savanna or into the grassland. And so some human is interacting with some animal more and more often because the ring of the city keeps spreading. I thought we talked about this. Then the bushmeat thing too, with the problems that you've heard in the global food supply. More and more people just go get stuff in their backyard, bushmeat. And that's just more people slaughtering giant fruit bats and slaughtering little bobcats and slaughtering monkeys or whatever they slaughter. Number two. With urbanization, you are around more vectors. And remember, a vector in mathematics is a line that connects 2 points with an arrow at the end. You guys know this, right? It goes, it's got a little arrow. Sort of like Sarah Wallach sitting right next to that trash can. And if there are flies in the trash can, they fly into Sarah Wallach's coffee. And that's how the disease goes from one place to Sarah. An arrow, the vector. Vectors are the things that make you sick. Like trash, sewage, crowds, and livestock. In big cities, we're surrounded by disease vectors. You can't avoid them. It's not your fault. You don't have to be a dirty person. But with more cities, there's just a higher density of things that deliver to you the diseases. Now remember, in combination, these things are going up. So of course, there was trash and sewage and crowds and livestock, 20,000 years ago. But a crowd back then would be like 20. And trash back then would be like the shells on the nuts that you couldn't eat. Things are a little different these days. You had chances of getting sick back then from animals, that's true. But if Graham Collector gets sick from eating a monkey 20 years ago, or 20,000 years ago, he probably limps into a cave and dies quietly and nobody knows about it. He becomes a mummy and then we make his fossil into an exhibit at a museum somewhere. And that's the whole end of his sad story. Nowadays, if Graham Collector eats a monkey and gets a disease, he's going to cough on 30,000 people in 1 week. Especially if he lives in a slum in a big old city somewhere. Next. Remember that evolution is basically an odds game. Most mutations are not beneficial. Almost every single mutation is maladaptive. So, if Graham Collector has a disease living in his body that is mutating, chances are most of those mutations will kill off the disease in his body. If that disease is in 2 people, well, chances are a little better that one of those organisms will succeed and become a stronger illness. But we've given them a lot of places to work on it. Currently, our planet has something like 7.2 billion hosts for disease, which is a lot of individual laboratories to try out that odds game. You know that the odds of winning the lottery are pretty slim, right? But if you buy a whole lot of tickets, your odds go up. Well, the humans are a whole lot of tickets. One of those humans is going to have the winning combo of mutations that works to make a disease more dangerous. We've given them a bigger pool to experiment in. It's just a basic fundamental mathematic thing. There's this book called The Evolution of Medicine, I believe, or The Evolution of Disease. And it gives you examples of this math. And it's a great analogy to talk about lottery tickets because it's actually like a pretty awesome way to think about it. Mathematically, we're just more places to try out the slim chances. Next, number 4, I'd like to show you something. This is hand sanding. You go, and then you go, and then you're all great, right? Sanitary. I read my labels. This says kills 99.99% of most common germs that may cause illness. That's a lot of hedging, but anyway. Yeah, most of maybe, kind of. May. Now, mostly. When I've killed off 99.99% of all the germs on my hands, what's left on my hands? Hand sanitizer and the 0.001 that didn't win by coincidence. It probably won because it is the buffest germ. Now, all of you are genetically inferior to me, obviously. So imagine, if we could remove all of you lesser individuals from the breeding pool, and just leave me and a couple supermodels, that would clearly elevate the genetic quality of our species, right? Obviously. I mean, all the future descendants of humanity would be almost as glorious as I am, which is pretty sweet. And this is kind of what happens with our diseases. It's not like you're going to let your baby die of a curable disease. That's a crime, brother. Like, you cannot. And so we medicate our children when they get sick, and that gets rid of almost all the illnesses, but what it leaves is the few strongest ones with no competition. All we remove is the less fit organisms, not the most fit. So my buddy Tim, he got a staph infection on his hand that they couldn't medicate. There was no medication that could get rid of his infection. So it spread, and spread, and spread, and started to eat his flesh. And he had like a divot you could put a golf ball in, and he would go like that, and it would just stay in the hole. It was like about that big around, and about that deep. Back of his hand, kind of had some trouble moving his fingers for a while, and there was all this like puffy ring of red, pussy nastiness around it.
Yum.
And they were like shaving his arm and getting ready. They had him in the hospital, and they were like, "Bro, we got to keep you in the tent, and if anybody gets sick, we're gonna all have to like everybody would walk in with like the mask and stuff. And they're like, you know, if that thing starts to spread, we're gonna cut off your arm." He's like, "But I like to surf," and they're like, "Bro, you're gonna die." He's like, "Oh." And I guess he just got lucky, like his body beat it, but you know, it was a pretty close call. There's this thing called MRSA, which is methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which is a type of bacteria that we can't kill anymore, and there's a lot of those. They're just medicine-resistant diseases. Yeah. No way, bro. Is that right? Yeah. And so, how did it go? You got lucky?
He died.
Yeah, I mean, it got like really small. You guys probably, no, you guys don't.
Pus?
Yeah, it was just like full of pus. And,
Yeah.
It had to like pop it and you know, get everything out. So it's like, I don't know, they just cleaned it up. I got it when I was in Costa Rica.
Dude, that's where he got it.
Really?
In a river? River mouth near the ocean?
I think I got bit by a spider and I like scratched it with it and like it just spread. I don't know.
Dude, bro, he got it in Costa Rica. I'm not kidding. Whoa, creepy coincidence.
Me and Will should get checked.
Dang, all right.
Guess who's never going to
Yeah, that's right. Ball, Costa Rica, they got no army. Dang, but you're all good? Scar? You have a nasty scar?
I don't think so.
He has a nice.
My homie has a super nasty scar. It looks gnar. It looks like a gunshot wound. All right. Remember that basically what we do is we make the remaining diseases stronger. There's now mosquitoes that don't respond to DEET. It's just, you know, it's evolution in the process. This is exactly how evolution works. Our medicines are a selective pressure to make disease stronger. And there's no alternative. It's not like you're not going to medicate your children. It's just, that's what happens. Next. I'd like to do a little demonstration, if I may. Please raise your hand if you or someone in your family has been to the following. Europe. Damn!
All rich.
Damn!
It's the Vatican.
Yeah. Excuse me. Raise your hand if you or your family has been to Central America.
Names of places.
Fine. South America. Asia? Africa? Ooh, scary. Oh, Africa. Australia? Okay, so check it out, kids. This classroom is a perfect melting pot of all the continents. Except Antarctica, I guess.
Iceland.
Antarctica? Okay. You know what's crazy? Hold on. Shut up. A couple of 100 years ago, nobody would have raised their hand. Like, literally nobody. You know, like 3,000 years ago, if her tribe of Indians lived on the other side of the Grand Canyon, we would see each other. We could like throw rocks at each other, or lob arrows, or try to send love notes, or like try to pee on each other. But it's a long distance. I tried. It's really far. That 1 mile would be enough to divide our populations, and I could watch their whole tribe die of some illness. And with that mile of fresh air blowing between us, like, sorry, tribe. Or they could watch my tribe die. It doesn't matter. But a mile of distance is all it would take to isolate populations. Today, go to a city like Los Angeles. 1 person from every country on earth has entered Los Angeles in the last 12 months. So think about that. Yeah.
That's not that weird.
Yeah.
Every what?
1 person from every country has entered Los Angeles in the last 12 months.
So like 100 people.
You know, you get like a couple of executives from Luxembourg, and you get like a couple of randoms from like Iceland, and that's it. It covers everybody. I mean, seriously, if you think about it, I'll bet you it's even less than 12 months. And I'm not trying to gross you out about Los Angeles, but that's every big city, and you know, they're melting pots of culture and food and art, and that's all beautiful, but they're also melting pots of disease. So look, this international travel was totally impossible. Now there's no isolation. Have you guys heard that there's a video game that has where you make a disease and it spreads around the world?
Yeah.
What's this called?
It's Plague Inc.
Plague Incorporated?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard that there's a video game where you design an illness that does just this. How virulent does it have to be to make it globally before it wipes everybody out? And I'm sorry to tell you, but this is like a really scary question that scientists have worked on for a really long time, and it's like an impossible weakness to solve. You know, what if diseases travel in coffee or in electronics? Here's my Africa and Asia right here. You know, with all of the goods and all the movement of people, and globally, more and more people are traveling internationally of all colors and all races and all stripes. International travel has become very common globally. And the movement of animals and food stuff. I mean, it's just a new thing. We don't have genetic isolation anymore. It's over. For diseases in particular, there's no isolation. Sabina, stop talking, dude. No, you're not. Sorry's for stuff you do by accident. I've asked you like 3 times today. 6, our movements are going to increase. Humans are becoming more migratory. Especially because of food collapses, and the one that's going to cause people to move faster than they've ever moved before, climate change. If you take the number of refugees in the entire history of humanity and multiply it by roughly 100, that's how many refugees will travel around the planet in the next decade. Oh, sorry, I might be lying, in the next century. It might be century, I forgot my statistic. The point is this: we will see more people moving around the globe in response to climate change than have ever moved in response to all other reasons to move. I mean, if you think about it, there's like a horrible war somewhere, and like 1 million people cross the border to escape their horrible country. And that happens, you know, unfortunately often. But we have like entire island nations going underwater. We have like giant shifts in food availability. We have booming and busting economies. In the next century, people are going to move all over the map. And so with more humans moving, of course, that is the human migratory problem. Now, here's another numerical issue. And this has always been the case. This isn't new. Still, a human generation is roughly equal to 250,000 generations of bacteria. So here's that numbers game again. Human generations versus generations of bacteria. It's always been this way. And it's not just bacteria, by the way. All germs, they're all tiny. So we just mutate more slowly. In the mutation game, we're more complicated, but they get more tries at it. Have you guys heard of the medical arms race? Where diseases are evolving to get stronger and you're evolving to get stronger? Well, you are pretty close to winning because you're really complicated. And they have better chances of beating you someday because they try more often. But with more humans in which they can experiment and more reasons for them to spread, their chances keep getting better. If you do the math, they're kind of gaining on us. Now, here's another one. Urbanization is on the rise globally. And where will you get more sick? On a football field with 10 people spread out, or in an elevator with 10 people crowded together? That's your cities. Because as humans urbanize, their density increases. And I have just one more. There is this pseudo-scientific theory, and I put an asterisk on it because it might just be, it's just a theory that our immune systems are overwhelmed. And I'll try to explain what that means tomorrow. Remember that this part is just theoretical. Everything else is pretty mathematically done.